I really don't know the key on this thing. Can we stop this for a second?
Just keep running. It's fine.
Well,
that's right. We'll edit it out. Welcome to a special edition of Live from the Heartland. This is Beyond Radio this time. We're filming it, and we are here at the lovely corner of Glenwood and Lunch. We're in the heart of Rogers Park, in the back offices of the Heartland Cafe. I'm Michael James, and I'm glad to be here today. I am honored to have my old friend Jack Traylor with us today. Jack is traveling with the Jefferson Starship, who are playing the Heartland this weekend, and he is our link to the Starship. Jack and I go way back. We met in Mexico in 1962. We are alums of Mexico City College up there on Carretera Mexico-Toluca in Mexico City. I rode my motorcycle down there at age 20. He drove his Volkswagen with his lovely former wife, and we got to be pals, and he actually looked out for me. He's a few years older. I was 20. And I got in a couple of tight spots, and I'm glad he was there to look out for me. When I went off to California in '64 to go to the great University of California at Berkeley, Jack was living up in Loomis, and he took me to the Roseville auction, and he played some guitar, and over the years we've seen each other, not enough, but enough to stay in touch. So good day to you, Jack. How are you today?
I'm fine, Michael. It's good to be here in Chicago.
Well, speaking of Chicago, you even back in the 60s, you were here in Chicago. It was my understanding you were in a group called the Gateway Singers, and that you played the Playboy Club and the Old Gate of Horn. How about telling us about your earlier trips to this great city of ours?
Right after I graduated, I think maybe the week that I graduated from San Jose State, I got a call from a guy named Jerry Walters, who had the Gateway Singers, asked me if I would like to audition for the Gateway Singers. He got my name from a friend of mine in Berkeley, Barry Olivier. And I thought this was somebody playing a practical joke and hung up on him. And
you have that quality.
The phone rang again, and he said, "Don't hang up on me, please. Yeah, I want you to come audition for the Gateway Singers." And at that time, they were a pretty hot item in the folk music scene in California, and back here too. So I went to audition, and there were probably 8 or 9 people. They all played better than I did. Some of them sang better than I did, and I had a broken leg from a motorcycle accident. So I'm hobbling around on crutches with this full leg cast and this thing that looked like some kind of deformed shoe that my father-in-law had made for me. He was a cobbler. And for some reason, Jerry Walters picked me. So I learned their repertoire, which was about 23, 24 songs, and traveled around the country with them for about a year singing this 23 or 24 songs until it was driving me mad. I couldn't do it anymore. I loved to travel. I loved playing. I liked the audiences, but just to be forced into a situation where I was just kind of a straight man for this guy and singing the same songs night after night, it was maddening. So I decided I wanted out. I got out and then went to school in Mexico City. Actually, what he's calling the Mexico City College, I think was called University of the Americas. But
later,
I think I think of that when I signed up for it, that's what it was being called.
How'd you do in your studies down there?
I did very well. Actually, very well. I was accredited by the Southern Texas College Conference or something. And I enjoyed it.
I remember it was a lot of kind of hippies and graduate student types, and actually
they had people teaching the classes that were like the guy that I had for geopolitics was the guy who had been the Mexican naval ambassador to the United States during World War II. The guy that we had for anthropology,
Eric Wolf, was it?
No,
or Butterfield?
No, the guy that that was economics. But the guy we had for anthropology was the head of the National Anthropological Museum at Chapultepec Park, and you got a pretty good education, even though you didn't have to speak Spanish to go to this school. And you keep saying that I got you out of scrapes. I don't know how many scrapes my ex-wife got me out of because she spoke Spanish. She was a French major, Spanish minor, and they kept asking her what is a nice French lady like you doing with him? She got me out of a lot of scrapes.
Well, you did get me out of a scrape, and very briefly, I had not done a lot of drinking in my life up to that point, and was a little poco borracho on tequila. We were at a place known as Garibaldi Square, where a lot of the mariachi singers, people will pull up in their cars, they'll pick a band, pay them some money, and there was a cantina there with a lot of hookers, and it was also called Típico Mexico. And a couple of these mariachi guys asked me, "Cómo se dice Típico Mexico?" And I thought they asked me how I liked that bar, and I said, "Oh, no me gusta demasiado putas," or something. And you threw me in the car as they were giving me these frowns. I can actually see their faces now. And I remember begging you to go back so that I could apologize.
No, there wasn't going to be any apology. A pound of flesh.
So what do you remember about playing these clubs in Chicago? Because this would be the early days of folk music in Chicago.
What I remember most is I was kind of the country mouse come to the city, and that all these myths about various aspects of music that I thought were myths or were not myths, they were realities, and I wasn't ready for them. I just turned 21, 22. I just turned 22. And I hadn't been exposed to this kind of thing. I was playing coffee houses and things out in California, and I was not exposed to this kind of thing at all.
And it corrupted you?
Didn't it? Well, a bit.
A bit.
Then I got my act back together and went back to a normal life.
Did you continue to play music over the years, both at home and out on the road? What's been your musical history?
I did. I played at home. I became a school teacher. I played at school. I played for some college concert series in California, and then I think about 1971 or 72, I got a phone call from an old friend of mine, Paul Kantner from the Jefferson Airplane at that time, and he just formed Jefferson Starship, and RCA had given them a record company as part of their contractual bargaining. Somehow they got this record company called Grunt Records, and they were allowed to sign new artists to this thing. And Paul asked me, "How would you like to make an album?" I thought, well, I was pretty much disillusioned by teaching by that time. I taught for 11 years, and it seemed like I was going nowhere in a hurry, and I was doing, I thought, perhaps more harm than I was good. So I took a year off of teaching and went in and did an album for Starship for Grunt Records. And I
actually was there for the final days of Wally Hyder Recording Studio, as I recall.
We had a good time.
72.
I had, I was, I think, 38 at the time, 37 or 38. And the band, the oldest one, was like 20. So we would get things like we'd be loading into places, and people would ask these kids, "Who's that old man with you?" And I think, "Who are they calling an old man?" And then I realized they're talking about me. But the album did fairly well. I think it got good reviews. It got a lot of airplay on independent stations.
And what was the name of the group?
The group was called Steel Wind, and the album was called Child of Nature. And it's, for its time, it's a nice piece of work. I'm not ashamed of it.
You talked, Jack, a little bit earlier. You mentioned being like the kind of the country mouse coming to the city. Let's talk about the country a little bit.
This happens to me all the time. The country mouse keeps going home and forgetting the lessons he learned in the city, and then comes back to the city and has to learn them all over again.